When you go to the doctor and they want to know how well you are, they take a few vital statistics, blood pressure, weight, things like that, cholesterol levels. With an economy, we only have a few things that we reliably look at, and those are GDP, CPI, and the unemployment rate. When we talk about GDP, it's used to measure the overall size of the economy. It stands for gross domestic product. Probably the more useful thing to know about it is the formula. Consumer spending plus investments, plus government spending, plus net exports are part of GDP. Overall, the goal of an economy is to steadily grow, but we know that sometimes economies are expanding too fast, sometimes they're in recessions. And so the goal of a market economy is to grow steadily, but we know that that never tends to happen. CPI stands for the Consumer Price Index. That is used to measure inflation. And if you think of it like a monthly shopping trip, the government has a big basket and they go and they buy a certain number of items every month, and they buy those same number of items every month. And when they buy those items, they figure out the price. And if you just simply divide the cost of the items now by the cost of the items a month ago, we can find out a rate of inflation. Third one is the unemployment rate, and again, the word rate indicates it's always going to be a percentage. The government determines this through a survey of 60,000 people every month. They ask them, are you in the workforce, meaning are you of working age and able to work? They ask them if they are not working, because if you have a job, you don't count as an unemployed person. And then they finally ask them if they are looking for work, because they simply want to know what is the number of people, or the percentage of people who would like a job but cannot find a job. When you're looking at the economy, it's important to have some benchmarks to go against so you know if it is a healthy economy or if it's an unhealthy economy. And with GDP, for an economy to be steadily growing at about 2 to 3% annually, or 2 to 3% a year, that would be a really nice growth pattern. If it grows too quickly, it's really hard to do that without either stepping on workers' rights or environmental regulations and things like that. With CPI, we would like it to grow at the same rate as GDP. Hopefully it's slightly higher than that. If it grows at the same rate as GDP, what we find out is that for the same price, people's standard of living would go up. If there is a little bit of extra inflationary pressure, that's a good thing. Always think of it like the carrot that gives people an incentive to buy an item now as opposed to waiting till later, because consumer spending, the C in the GDP formula, consumer spending is the largest chunk of any economy, and so you want to make sure that consumers have an incentive to continue spending. And finally, with an unemployment, we would like to have a rate of about 4 to 6%. If it's much higher than that, then it means the economy is not creating enough jobs for the people who want them. And if it's significantly lower than 4%, then people don't have a lot of mobility so they could switch jobs. The component of unemployment called frictional employment is dependent on you and I being able to quit our job if we don't like it, or bosses being able to fire employees who, for whatever reason, either can't do the job or won't do the job. Finally, it's also important to notice which direction an indicator is moving, because that tells you a lot about where the economy itself is. With GDP, if you see rising growth in GDP, of course, that means that the economy is expanding. Our classic definition of a recession is if GDP over a 6-month period or 2 consecutive quarters is shrinking. And so the definition just simply creates the idea that GDP has to be growing for the economy to be growing. For CPI, we expect that when the economy is growing, that there is that inflationary pressure. So typically it's the biggest fear for the market is that when the economy is growing, that it might be growing fast enough where it's creating inflation, which we don't want too much of that. And finally, unemployment. The component of unemployment which is tied to the business cycle, which is what this graph shows here, the business cycle, is called cyclical unemployment, and we expect to see, as an economy moves into a recession, that the unemployment rate tends to rise.